I like seeing the range between the two speakers.
The presentation was amazing. It kind of showed the scope of Wilson speakers and where you can go if you had more money.
Anyway, last Saturday, we had the wonderful privilege and fun to welcome Peter McGrath from Wilson Audio to join us and talk to our wonderful clients about the Wilson XVXs. I don't know if that camera can pick them up, but that's my pair over there. And then in another room, we've got the Alexia Vs. So he came all the way to talk to our clients and Christian, if you will. Kristen, this is our new audio room. We've always had this room, but previously it was in a state of disarray. We got to a point where during COVID, we were starting to use this room really more as a staging area so I could test speakers, test equipment before we brought them up to our clients' homes to install. And then it just became a big mess, and we never really used it for demonstrations. And then Peter said, yeah, I'm going to come up and speak with your clients and meet with you and do training for your guys. So I called Manoush. He's my friend, very good friend, and an architect. I said, Manoush, you got to help. Let's redesign this room, make it look good, make it sound good. And then Peter and Bill McKeegan can do their demo in here. So Manoush and his boys did an incredible job. In about 3 weeks, they had this room all going. It sounds great. It looks wonderful.
Oh my God! Wow!
And then I started the arduous task of getting to know the room and moving the XVXs 1 inch at a time. And it took me multiple days because each time I started getting going, I'd get interrupted. And then by the time you come back, you're in a completely different frame of mind. You have to start over again. So it took me multiple days. And I finally got it to where I thought was sounding pretty good. And then I thought, yeah, I can do more. But the problem is you run into the reality of standing wave issues. There is a seat where you can get incredibly good sound, but then the seat behind that seat, you get incredibly good bass, but then you get a lot more of the room, and it becomes a big trade-off. And I couldn't reconcile it. So I thought, okay, we'll let Peter, when he comes, maybe he'll take a pity on me and set them up, help me set up. So anyway, long story short, Peter arrives Friday morning, and he was very, very gracious. He said, okay, I'll help you set up your speakers, but you have to move them. So we came in 2 hours before the store opens, and so I was the only one moving the speakers. So the speakers weigh about 600 pounds. And so suffice it to say, it was a huge workout, me moving the speakers an inch at a time, Peter sitting very comfortably going, one more inch. And I'm pushing and pulling, and anyway, it was a lot of fun. What's fascinating is this. Throughout the whole setup, I purposely did not give Peter much in the way of my feedback. I wanted to see what he would come up with and then compare with my notes. Then this way it would be as objective as I guess possible. Anyway, so he had me first. So for those of you who don't know, the XVX, like the previous generations of very large speakers, the port can be moved from the front or the back. So in some cases, by having the port facing the wall behind the speaker, you might get better bass. So I started off by having the port facing the back. And Peter said, well, let's move the port so that it faces forward. So took us a few minutes. I did that, and Peter, literally within seconds of playing his cut, he says, nope, it's no good. So we moved the port back and then started arduously moving the speakers 1 inch at a time, closer and closer to the wall behind the speakers. And then at some point, after he was no longer satisfied, he had me start moving the speakers back forward. And each time he was doing that, he was taking copious notes on a grid, a piece of paper where Wilson gives a copy to all their dealers, and you're supposed to make down your notes in terms of the sound stage, the image, the center image, the bass depth, the bass definition, how it blooms, and so on. For those of you who are interested in knowing how Wilson recommends a setup, you can go to Wilson Audio's YouTube channel and search for David Wilson, who goes through the setup procedure. Anyway, he did exactly that, and so did I. And after about an hour and a half, when it was all done, he says, "Okay, this is as good as we're going to get in this room." And then I looked down, and we were literally a quarter of an inch apart from each other's settings. So on the one hand, I was extremely gratified to know that we independently came to very, very similar settings. And on the other hand, the other thing that it reinforced in me again is how consistent you can get your results to be if you're trained to do it and if you know what you're listening for. Anyway, I just wanted to give you that background in terms of what the Wilson setup process is like, and then we'll get into a little bit more details in a moment. So for the weekend, for this room, we used the D'Agostino progression preamplifier with the M550 monoblock amplifiers. And then in the other room, we had the Alexia V with the progression integrated amplifier. So after he was done helping me set up in this room, Peter went and started training my boys and Allison about not only the company, but also the setup process, which I to date had not had a chance to show the guys. So let's turn it over to the boys and see what they think. So Louis, tell me a little bit about what Peter took you guys through and how the process worked.
Okay, so
just a bit of highlights, I guess.
The highlight was how he stood at the back of the speaker. We had set it up somewhat similar to what he wanted to see, and on Thursday, I think, yeah. And he started to show us how to voice what we're hearing from the mid and the tweeter section. And he would call out, using his voice to get the reproduction. So we would then start moving more toe or, forward, backward into the grid, his grid paper, which he would write down. And it was, and in no time, he had it figured out and said he couldn't believe how good the room sounded too. And, we have always thought that it sounded well, but we had reconfigured the room from facing the equipment and speakers one way to another way. And surprisingly, he said it was extremely good.
So, Mike, when he was doing his voicing, was he the one that was talking, or you guys were talking, doing the voicing? He was the one that was voicing it?
So essentially, and this can go for not just Wilson speakers, this can go for loudspeakers in general. He started off not with where the speakers were placed, but he started off by putting his ear in the place where the speakers might be placed to have an area where the speaker will go. And he called it the zone of neutrality, which he was doing for these speakers as well. So he starts off with his voice, and he'll start off at where the speaker might be, and he'll essentially just talk to himself and hear how it sounds, hear what the response is like. Is it too bass heavy? Is it thin? Are you hearing like a clapback echo? Are you hearing any first reflections? And once he did that, then he got the speaker to an area where then we can start to do very, very fine adjustments. And we were actually making quarter of an inch adjustments. And it was not just noticeable, it was readily noticeable. It was pretty amazing how much a small movement can affect the tone of the room, the tone of the speakers. And what he said is perfectly correct. Sometimes that quarter of an inch, that half an inch is all the difference in the world. And he was right. It sounded from amazing to spectacular.
Yes. And with not much movement.
with not much movement.
Right.
Yeah. These were very precise adjustments, but it really was night and day.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so let's move forward a little bit. So during the event, did you guys get? Well, you sat in because you were doing the recording and so on. What was your impression of the visitors, our clients who were invited and had an opportunity to sit in with the demonstration? What did you think of Peter's music, and what do you think of how the clients felt?
Yeah, so I think Peter is unique in that he's also a recording engineer. So he brought along a lot of tracks which no one else is ever going to hear again unless you're listening to his playlist on his laptop. So he specializes in analog recordings. He doesn't use any EQ for the most part. He doesn't use any compression. So the tracks that he was playing were very transparent. You could hear the coughs in the audience sometimes. You could hear people rustling, but it made it very visceral. And you could tell with the guests who were listening as well. It was something, you weren't listening to just generic recording XYZ. You were listening to something unique. This was a one-off. This recording only exists on Peter's, in Peter's files. And I thought that was amazing, and everyone was flabbergasted with how well these recordings sound and how well they were presented. Because usually we're listening to, just like for us, we put on the same tracks to demo. It was very nice to hear something unique that you're not going to hear again, but recorded with the utmost care and tenderness, and all the little details and even the little flaws of the performance were coming through. No speaker is going to sound
Perfect.
like a live event that you're sitting in front of, but to have it that close was something very special.
He played quite a few tracks just from streaming, commercially available, but I like the 2 or 3 pieces that he recorded himself.
Oh, okay.
I know him. He used to record, but he's still doing recording. So the one that he make himself, I think they sound a lot better. Like that much, yeah. And the choice of music is good. I'm more classical jazz type of music. That's what I like. But he picked some electronic music, which is interesting too.
The first time I heard Wilson's was probably about 20 years ago. I came into the store. It was at a different location. And Adrian played the Wah Puppy Sevens. Mm-hmm. And when you hear something that incredible that you've never heard before, it kind of anchors in your mind. And I've always had that Wilson sound as my reference. And I've heard different Wilsons over the years. But when you hear essentially what is the pinnacle of that technology and how real it is, and just how lifelike it is and how it brings you into the music, and you forget that you're actually listening to equipment, you think that you're listening to live people over there, that's really what you're looking for. And to see that we brought that through technology is incredible. Very often you'll have speakers that they're good for this type of music or they're good for that type of music. This is good for whatever we were listening to. And somebody made the observation that the opera singer it was really screechy at the top. But Peter then said, and I was thinking it too, but that's what her voice is. And very often, like a snare drum is a harsh sound. We sometimes want to soften everything, and we're losing the reality. And that's what you want. You want as real a reproduction as possible.
He also played "quote unquote" regular recordings as well.
He did, yes, he did, yeah.
I think in general, our clients were incredibly impressed.
I think so.
Yeah. So if you ever get a chance to sit into one of Peter's presentations, you definitely should. I've been very fortunate to have experienced many of them, and every one of them is always wonderful, especially if you love music and not just as an audiophile, although you will certainly enjoy that as an audiophile. but if you enjoy music as well, because he'll play all sorts of music from choral to symphony to some obscure Brazilian piece of music to some soundtrack that nobody else knows about, and then to Keith Richards singing reggae.
Was Keith Richards actually singing on that track?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So he sent Jerry to call me into the room because I was
Because you're
managing the
Jamaican.
and I'm going, wow. And the bass from that track was amazing, and some of the guests were wagging their feet, and then some were bouncing their heads, and in that track, but that's the only track I heard because I wasn't in on the presentations. So
he's also he's very well spoken, and when someone speaks with that level of experience, there's a wealth of knowledge in every word that he says.
Yeah. I think the only unfortunate thing about the weekend was that Bill McKeegan, who was also supposed to come and join us, had hurt his back earlier that week, and so he couldn't make it. He was very much in pain and laid up, and so I told him take a break. There's no reason to try and make it, and we'll see you again another time. What was perhaps for me the highlight was how good that little, I shouldn't say little because it's not, but that progression integrated amplifier sounds. The progression integrated amp, for those of you who've never had a chance to hear it, it's essentially a combination of the progression preamp and the progression stereo amp into one chassis. And you also have the option of the phono board and or the DAC board. So we ordered ours with the DAC board. And that thing is shockingly good. It's shocking. I mean, it's obviously not inexpensive because it's so good, but on the other hand, it's a lot cheaper than I thought the end result sounded. And in fact, Peter, in the initial setup, had told me multiple times, this thing is so amazing that it should only cost this much, because Peter has had the experience of traveling all over the world, doing setups for all kinds of different distributors around the world, for different big shows all over the world. And he's heard all the big amps, all the top brands that you can think of. And he was amazed at how good this integrated amp is. And I would concur, this thing, I was truly impressed by how good this integrated amp is. And if you didn't need to go any higher, didn't need a lot more power, and or budget constrained, this thing is remarkable. Truly is a wonderful integrated amp. I'm actually looking forward to comparing it to the separates, the preamp and the monoblock amps that we have, just to see how much of a delta there is, because I'm so impressed by how good that thing is.
That room is rocking.
Yeah, oh yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That room is really rocking.
It's not a big room. It's not a small room. But it's big enough for a speaker like the Alexia to really flex, and flex it does. It really does. Anyway, that's just this video. We just wanted to share our experience with the Wilson event, the D'Agostino Wilson event. And if you ever get a chance to hear a properly set up set of Wilson speakers, especially with D'Agostino's, have a listen and see what you think. If you've heard it, love to see your comments below. And we should be making more review videos for you shortly. We just have been so busy, we haven't had a chance. But anyway, short video. Hopefully we'll see you again next time. Take care. Bye-bye.